Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the reviewing irrational functions review. So the first problem that we're going to take a look at is number 1. Now with number 1, we've got some parameter changes that we need to address, and plus I need to also give the domain and range of each function and sketch the graph. So those are the two things that I'm asked to find. So I'm going to go ahead and write domain and range in order so I don't forget those two things after I'm finished. Okay, now looking at this equation, I noticed that there's a plus 5, and since it's on the outside, that's going to shift our entire equation up 5 units. Okay, and then inside the radical, that's going to shift left and right. Now, because it's negative, if I were to set that equal to 0, I would end up with x plus 3, which would shift this entire equation, okay, right 3 units. So it's going to go shift right 3 units, 1, 2, 3, and it's going to go up 5 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I do not have a scale, so the scale is 1, and it's also positive, so it's going to go ahead and graph in the positive direction with a scale of 1. All right, now looking at the parameter, the domain and range, my smallest x value on here, shifting from left to right, would be negative infinity. The smallest domain on this one would actually be positive 3. Okay, and I have all the values on the right side of positive 3. Okay, so it's going to end up being x's, and we can include 3. So it's going to end up being 3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than positive infinity. Now, when we're talking range, those are our y values. So we're going to start off with our smallest y value, which in this case is 5. Okay, less than or equal to y less than positive infinity. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 2. Now, looking at number 2, we're going to go ahead and start looking at this equation. Notice how we have a negative 4. Now, instead of positive shift, it's going to go down 4. Let's see if I can get this to stop doing that. Nope, not going to happen. Okay, so let's go ahead and, there we go. That negative 3 on the inside of the radical, that's going to tell us that this entire equation is going to shift 3 to the right. Okay, and then this one does have a scale, so instead of opening up, it's going to actually open down because it's going to be reflected about the x axis. Okay, now let's go ahead and graph this. So we're going to start by shifting the entire unit down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, then it's also going to be shifted 3 right, 1, 2, 3, and instead of a positive radical, we're going to have a negative radical. And that's going to change our range. But let's start with our domain. Okay, our domain in this case is going to start all the way, starting at positive 3. So we're going to start out positive 3. We can include positive 3, x less than infinity. Boy, that didn't look like infinity. Okay, now the range on this one, the range are all of the y values. So since we're looking at this graph all the way up here, okay, it's going to start off at negative infinity. I can never include negative infinity, so that's going to be less than our y values. Okay, less than or negative 4. The screen's being touchy right here. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 3. Now number 3 is a lot like number, like number 1. It's positive. The only difference is that we do have a shift down 8. Okay, this positive is going to make it shift left 1. Okay, and it's a positive radical, so we know that it's gonna go up and to the right. So let's go ahead and go down. So this is going to end up being 1, 2, 3, whoa, hold on. Okay, this is going to shift down 8. I wish it would figure out what it's doing. Maybe it'll do that. Sorry about that. Okay, so we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we're going to go right 1. Okay, and that's going to go, our first point is going to start at -1, -8. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and open up and out because it is a positive scale of 1. Now, with this one, our domain, since we're looking at our smallest x value, is going to start off at -1. If it helps, make an ordered pair. So that would be -1, -8. Okay, and then so we're going to end up with -1 less than or equal to x, which is less than infinity. Now our range is going to start off with our y value, which is -8, less than or equal to y, which is less than positive infinity. Okay, because we're going to continue on to positive infinity. Now looking at number 4. Number 4 is a little different because we do have a scale of -2, so that's going to change some things up. It's actually going to open up wider, okay, or it's going to end up being that vertical stretch, so it's going to be pulled down, and I say down because of the negative. So we already know that this is going to reflect about the x-axis down. This is going to end up shifting down 2 units, and this is going to end up shifting left 3. So let's go ahead and plot this. So it's going to be 1, 2, and shift left 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then it does reflect about the x-axis, and it has a wide opening. Now that's not going to affect our domain and range too much. This point really signifies what our domain and range is. Okay, so looking at just the domain, we're going to end up with -3 less than or equal to x less than positive infinity, because it continues on in that positive direction. Our range is going to end up being -infinity less than y less than or equal to, and our greatest point is going to end up being that -2 right there. Okay, so our y value is -2. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. Number 5, I notice right off the bat, has a cubic. Hello. A cubic function. Okay, it does tell us that the entire graph is going to shift up 2, and it's going to shift right 3. Now remember, if it's a cubed function, that's something like this. But since this is the cube root, then we're going to end up having the inverse of that. Oh, that was a bit bad. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so it's going to reflect about y equals x-axis, and it's going to end up being a cubic function. The center is going to shift, okay, 2 up and 3 right. So I'm going to go ahead and redraw this. This is going to end up being 1, 2, and it's going to be 3 right. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it starts off in the positive direction, kind of like a square root, and then down here it's going to shift down and go off into negative infinity. So for the domain on this one, is going to start off at negative infinity less than x less than positive infinity. So we really have all real numbers when we're talking about the domain. Now the range, sorry guys, the range starts off at negative infinity because as this continues to go to negative infinity, it's also going to go down to negative infinity when we're talking about the y-axis. Okay, so that's going to be negative infinity less than y less than positive infinity, Okay, also all real numbers. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 6. Goodness. All right, now with number 6, I notice right off the bat, our scale has changed. It really has changed to 1/2. Okay, now if you're not sure what's happening with the scale, you can always substitute some values in to see what's going on, especially 0, because that'll help you very quickly. Okay, or I notice that it's +2 in here, and I need a cubic, so I might plug in a point like trying to get it to 1. That would be like -1 plus 2 would give me the cube root of 1. The cube root of 1, well, I know that x plus 2, that's going to shift it left 2. 1, 2. And it's not shifting horizontally at all, or vertically at all. So I know the center point is going to be right there at 0, -2, but I'm not sure for 100% what's going to happen with this 1/2. So I went ahead and substituted a point. Okay, my point that I substituted was -1. -1 plus 2, that would just give me +1. The cube root of +1 times 1/2 is just 1/2. So that ends up being -1, 1.5. All right, so that really didn't tell me much here. So I want to try to maybe keep going. Another cube root is the cube root of 8. That would give me a +2. So I need to think about what number in here could I add that would, when I add 2, would give me 8. And in this case, it's going to end up being 6. So if I look at 6, if I look at 6, then I would end up having 6 plus 2. Okay, 6 plus 2 would just give me 8, so the cube root of 8 would give me 2, and 2 times 1/2 is just going to give me 1. Okay, so as I continue to go on this x-axis to 6, 1, 2, 3, it's going to shift right there at 1. So it's very, very narrow, but as it continues on, it will increase both directions, up and out. Okay, this will go out and down. So that's going to help me with the domain and range. So the domain on this one is going to start out at -infinity, less than x, less than positive infinity. Now when I'm looking at the y values, or the domain, or the range, okay, it's also going to end up being all real numbers, so it's going to start off at -infinity, less than y, less than positive infinity. Okay. All right, now I'm going to stop the video here, just because there's been a lot of mistakes and I'm still trying to learn how to do this, and I want to double check that everything is right. Okay?